Welcome to the Tenet Indigenous Wisdom Research Center. I am your host, Feivan Yosef, musician and lead researcher of One Voice Betezema Music Chamber. In this podcast series, we decode the profound mysteries of ancient vocal acoustics, sacred geometry, and divine frequencies. Our journey into the living wave begins now.
If you walk over to a piano right now and you just play every single key from left to right.
Right, just sliding your hand up the keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. From that lowest rumbling bass note all the way to the highest piercing treble, you probably think you're hearing like all the notes that exist.
You know, you have your white keys, your black keys.
Right. It feels completely full. But the thing is, you aren't actually hearing everything. In fact, you're hearing a mathematically censored version of reality.
Which is, I mean, it's an acoustic illusion, a very convincing one, obviously, but an illusion nonetheless.
It really is. Because we treat that keyboard and, the notes on it as the fundamental laws of acoustic physics, like gravity.
Like it's just the way the universe is built.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if the way you've been taught to hear, to literally process and understand music, is actually a mathematical cage? So welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something that is going to completely change the way you listen to everything.
From ancient chants to modern rock and roll, really.
Yeah, everything. We are unpacking this massive, truly fascinating academic excerpt today. It's titled The Misinterpreted Wave Journal Part 1.
And I gotta say, the premise of this paper is incredibly ambitious.
Oh, totally.
It systematically deconstructs how Western music theory took these vastly complex, continuous soundscapes of East Africa.
And the whole global diaspora, really.
Right, and basically slapped this highly reductionist label on all of it.
It's a story about what happens when you try to force this living, breathing, multidimensional organism into like a tiny, flat, rigid box.
Which never works out well.
No, it doesn't. So our mission for you today is to basically unlearn the grid. We are going to explore this multidimensional acoustic geometry that was mapped out like centuries ago.
Long before modern music theory.
Exactly. And we're going to understand how an invisible, basically unerasable acoustic memory eventually gave birth to the blues. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the cage itself.
Right, because to understand what got erased, you have to look at the eraser.
Yeah, the eraser. In the West, our music system is based on something called 12-Tone Equal Temperament, or 12-TET.
And to really grasp what 12-TE actually is, we need to look at the physics of sound, but also, how human biology perceives that sound.
Okay, lay it on me.
So in basic acoustics, you have absolute frequency, which is measured in hertz.
Right, hertz.
And hertz is simply a measurement of how fast a sound wave is vibrating per second. So if a string vibrates 440 times a second, that's 440 hertz.
Which we call an A, right?
Exactly. That's a standard A note.
But human beings don't actually process music as absolute frequencies. Like, I don't listen to a song on the radio and think, yes, a lovely 440 hertz followed by, a 523 hertz.
No one does that. We hear in relative intervals, we hear the distance or the relationship between two notes.
Right. It's all about the space between them.
Exactly. And to measure that subjective perceived distance, acoustic scientists use a unit of measurement called cents. C-E-N-T-S.
Cents. Like pennies.
Like pennies, yeah. In standard acoustic physics, an octave, which is the distance from one note to the next highest note of the same name, where the frequency literally doubles, is divided into exactly 1,200 cents.
Okay, wait, so from middle C to high C, that entire space is an umbrella of 1,200 cents. Got it.
Now, what the Western 12-tone equal temperament system did was take that 1,200 cent octave and slice it up into exactly 12 equal intervals.
12 semitones.
Great.
Oh, okay. 1,200 divided by 12, that's exactly 100 cents per note. So every single key on a standard piano moving from one to the next is strictly 100 cents apart.
Right. 100, 200, 300, all the way up.
It is perfectly mathematically equalized.
It is. But the paper points out that this is not a universal law of nature. It is a highly localized, highly specific process of mathematical codification.
It's basically an Excel spreadsheet for sound.
That's a great way to put it.
But this is the part that always confused me. Like, why did we do that? Who woke up one day and decided that the infinite universe of vibrating sound waves needed to be sliced into exactly 100-cent increments?
Well, the paper traces this back to a really fascinating historical pipeline. You actually have to go way back to early antiquity.
Like ancient Greece.
Yeah. Historically, early Greek philosophers think of figures in the Pythagorean tradition. They traveled to the temples of Northeast Africa.
What? Wow. Really?
Yeah, they went there to study acoustics, to study geometry, and to study the natural harmonic series. Because the indigenous populations in that region had been exploring and mapping these acoustic realities for a very, very long time.
Okay, so the very roots of the mathematical theory of sound actually start in Africa.
They do. But when these philosophers returned to Europe, and as this knowledge filtered through centuries of European classical theorists, the goal began to shift.
Shift out.
The Western theorists increasingly sought to isolate and control sound. They wanted standardization.
But why? I mean, standardization usually implies an industrial need, right? Were they building something?
They were building increasingly complex instruments.
Huh?
As European music evolved toward polyphony, meaning multiple distinct melodies playing at once, and as instruments like the harpsichord and eventually the piano were developed, composers ran into this massive physical problem.
What was the problem?
They wanted to be able to modulate. They wanted to change keys mid-song to create, like, dramatic shifts in emotion.
Right, like when a pop song bumps up a key for the final chorus and it feels huge.
Exactly. But with older, more natural tuning systems, if you changed keys, the mathematical ratios would get all skewed.
Oh, so the math wouldn't line up anymore?
Right. The new key would sound horribly out of tune, like nails on a chalkboard, unless you stopped the concert and physically retuned all the strings on the instrument.
I see. So 12T was basically an engineering compromise.
Exactly.
If every note is artificially forced to be exactly 100 cents apart, it's uniform. It's perfectly interchangeable. You can start a scale on C or on F sharp, and the math works out exactly the same.
Right. You never have to retune mid-performance.
That's why.
It allowed for Western harmonic modulation, and I mean, it is highly effective for what it was designed to do. It gave us Bach, Beethoven, Mozart.
Sure. Obviously incredible music.
But the paper argues that in achieving this engineering feat, 12-tet acted as a massive sensory filter. By locking the octave into 12 fixed points, 12-tet actively strips away all the microtonal variations.
It just deletes them.
Yeah, it structurally omits anything that doesn't land perfectly on that 100-cent mark.
You know, if you think about 12-tit, it's like a staircase.
Yeah.
You're either standing on step 1 or you jump up and land on step 2.
Right.
You're at 100 cents or you're at 200 cents. You literally cannot stand on step 1.5. The architecture simply won't let you.
You just fall through.
Yeah. You have to jump from distinct, predefined step to distinct, predefined step.
It's a linear architectural framework built on strict, inescapable division.
But the indigenous acoustic reality, like the actual raw physics of human voices and traditional string instruments, is not a staircase. It's a continuous ramp. Or, you know, a fluid slide.
A continuous wave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're sliding down a ramp, you don't just magically teleport from point A to point B. You physically pass through every single microscopic point in between.
Right, the whole spectrum.
You pass through 101 cents, 137 cents, 185 cents. And the paper is arguing that in these East African traditions, the magic, the emotion, the actual meaning of the music happens entirely in the space between the steps.
It happens in the air while you're jumping, to use your staircase imagery.
Right.
And the author of the journal makes a profound speculative leap here, connecting acoustics to human sociology.
Oh, this part was so interesting.
They discuss how borders and divisions are artificial human inventions. We draw arbitrary lines on maps to keep humanity scattered. We partition land into nations and properties.
There's drawing lines everywhere.
Exactly. But this paper argues that while we partitioned the geographic world, we also created a systemic sensory division.
A sensory partition.
Yes, we applied this rigid grid to global acoustics, and by doing so, we historically quieted the very frequencies that were meant to bridge human consciousness. By defining music purely by what fits onto the 100-cent staircase, we completely ignored the continuous wave that connects us all.
We put blinders on our own ears, all in the name of making the piano easier to tune.
Pretty much.
So if we accept that the Western grid is just a localized artificial staircase, we really need to understand the architecture of the system it was trying to replace. If it's not a staircase, what is it?
Right. What's the alternative?
And to answer that, the paper takes us way back to the early centuries of our era, to a figure named Saint Yard.
Oh, the legacy of Saint Yard is absolutely central to understanding the East African acoustic mindset.
Tell me about him.
According to tradition and the scholarly texts referenced here, he wasn't just composing catchy melodies for the local church. He is described as a highly enlightened spiritual adept who channeled a multidimensional music and notation system.
Okay, I have to admit, whenever I hear the phrase multidimensional music, my brain instantly tries to figure out the actual mechanics. Like, how does one map sound to multiple dimensions?
Well, in St. Yard's framework, sound is not just random noise, and it's certainly not mere aesthetic entertainment. Sound is pure geometry.
Geometry. Okay.
He mapped sacred acoustics simultaneously to the human body and to the broader spiritual cosmos. Every element of the music, the specific pitches, the rhythms, the lyrical meanings, was engineered.
Like actual engineering.
Yes, it was designed to resonate at highly specific therapeutic frequencies.
Yeah, the paper refers to it as a technology for human remembrance, a carrier wave of intent. The belief is that these frequencies physically and spiritually align the listener.
That's the core philosophy, yes.
The vibrations of the music are literally meant to tune the physical body, the mind, and the spirit with hidden heavenly realms. It's music as an ancient universal medicine.
A holistic medicine.
But, I want to push back on this a little bit. I want to play devil's advocate for the Western theorists who analyze this music centuries later.
Sure, go ahead.
If this system developed by Saint Yard is so infinite, so cosmically vast and continuous, why did Western musicologists universally label East African music as pentatonic? Penta meaning 5.
Right, the 5-note scale.
If it's an infinite ramp, why did highly trained academics say, nope, there are only 5 notes here?
Isn't it possible that a 5-note scale is just biologically easier on the human ear, and the Westerners just correctly identified a biological preference?
That is the core conflict of the entire paper, actually, and it's a vital question. The paper clarifies that the pentatonic label is a fundamental systemic analytical error.
It's just wrong.
It's a complete failure of translation. When external theorists arrived and listened to indigenous Ethiopian musicology, things like the Kenyat system, which includes these deeply revered scales like Tizita, Bati, Ambassel, or Anchihoye, they tried to force what they were hearing into their 12-tat spreadsheet.
They were looking for the steps on the staircase.
Exactly.
They heard a complex continuous wave, but their brains were trained to only recognize 100-cent intervals. Yes. They identified 5 dominant pitches in these scales, so they said, aha, 5 notes. It's a pentatonic scale.
They just ignored everything in between.
Yep. They equated Tizita to a major pentatonic. They looked at Ambassel and called it a Phrygian pentachord, which is just Western jargon for a specific 5-note sequence starting on a minor interval.
So they just matched the data to the closest existing file folder they had in their European cabinet.
Exactly what they did. But the paper says this completely misunderstands the architecture of the sound. In the Western mind, a note in a scale is a rigid boundary. It's a closed box.
Right.
If you're playing a C major scale, you play a C, you play a D, you do not play a C sharp. The boundary is designed to keep other notes out.
But in the indigenous reality, those 5 pitches are not boundaries. The paper calls them structural anchors.
Or cosmic gravity centers. This completely changes how we should visualize a musical scale.
Exactly. We have to throw away the staircase entirely. And, earlier I was thinking about this like a solar system, like flying between planets. But that's not quite right either. The paper describes a state of constant tension. It's more like magnetic poles.
Magnetic poles is a much better analogy.
Right. Those 5 notes aren't walls. They are magnets. They have massive gravitational and magnetic pull. So the performer, the singer, isn't just jumping from magnet to magnet.
No, they are dwelling in the magnetic tension between the poles.
Yes. The true art, the true aesthetic and therapeutic identity of the tradition doesn't live on the magnet itself. It lives in the pole. It lives in how the singer leans into the magnetic field, resisting it, sliding along it.
The reality of this acoustic system is spherical and continuous, not linear and compartmentalized. To call it pentatonic implies that only the 5 magnets exist, and the entire magnetic field between them is just empty space.
Which is intellectually lazy.
The paper argues it's worse than lazy. It's a profound logical contradiction. And to prove this, the author makes a brilliant interdisciplinary pivot. They step completely outside of music theory and look at linguistics.
Oh, this part is so compelling. The linguistic argument regarding the Ge'ez script and the Amharic language.
It really is.
Let's break this down because it perfectly exposes the fatal flaw in the pentatonic assumption.
Okay, so Ge'ez and Amharic are the historical and linguistic foundations of the regional oral and liturgical traditions in East Africa. Ge'ez is the ancient liturgical language, and Amharic is the modern working language of Ethiopia.
Got it.
Both are built upon a syllabary system that utilizes 7 distinct vocalic orders.
The 7 vowels. From genes to sabi, the paper lists them phonetically. U, I, A, E, O.
And this is where we have to talk about formant spaces.
Formant spaces, what exactly are those?
A formant is essentially an acoustic resonance chamber in the human vocal tract. When you change the shape of your mouth, your tongue, your lips, you are physically altering the frequency of the sound wave coming out of your throat.
Okay, so if I say E, my tongue is high and my lips are pulled back. The physical geometry of my mouth is completely different than if I say ooh, or my lips are rounded and my tongue is low.
Exactly. So the biological hardware of the people in this region is conditioned from birth by a linguistic framework that demands they navigate 7 distinct formant spaces in daily speech.
7 spaces every single day.
Every time someone speaks a sentence in Amharic, every time they recite a sacred text in Ge'ez, they are physically shifting their vocal tract through at least 7 distinct acoustic spaces, plus all the infinite microscopic phonetic glides required to string those words together.
So just think about what the Western theorists are claiming here.
It's absurd.
They're claiming that an entire culture whose language demands a minimum of 7 fluid vocal spaces just to, like, buy bread at the market or greet a neighbor suddenly, the moment they start to sing, they forget their own biology.
Right.
They miraculously restrict their vocal tracts to a rigid 5-note limit.
It makes absolutely no sense. It's a massive logical contradiction. The human voice doesn't suddenly lose its physical agility and drop into a mathematical 5-slot cage just because a melody started.
Which brings us to the actual vocal technique itself.
Yeah.
The paper introduces one of its most important concepts, Qilaze. Qilaze.
Qilaze.
What is happening physically when a singer performs Qilaze?
Yeah. Ornamentation makes it sound like a decorative afterthought, like icing on a cake.
Exactly. And it's not. Qilaze represents the systematic intentional vocal inflections, the microtonal slides, and the specific vibratos that the singer performs.
It's the core of it. Remember your magnetic field analogy. Qilaze is the physical act of the singer navigating that magnetic tension. It is how they move away from one structural anchor and lean into the magnetic pole of another, hovering in the microtonal continuum.
It is the actual substance of the music.
What's fascinating here is that modern comparative musicology will look at a living Keynette scale. Strip away all the Qilaze, strip away all the microtonal sliding, isolate just the 5 anchor points, and proudly declare, look, it's an ancient Greek and hematonic pentatonic scale.
Oh man, it's like finding a blueprint of a skyscraper. Just a piece of paper showing where the steel beams go, and then looking at the finished, living, breathing building with glass, electricity, and thousands of people inside, and saying, ah yes, these two things are exactly the same.
That's a perfect analogy.
You're mistaking the rigid skeleton for the living entity.
The 5 structural pitches are just the skeleton. The Qilaze, the continuous wave, is the flesh, the blood, the consciousness. You cannot understand the organism if you ignore the flesh and blood.
Okay, so logically, the pentatonic label is flawed. Linguistically, we've proven the vocal tract is capable of much more. The indigenous reality is a continuous, fluid wave, and the Western grid is a rigid, superimposed staircase.
Right, all of that is established theoretically.
But here's the massive challenge the authors face. If these microtones, these Qilaze slides, are so fluid, and they live entirely in the in-between spaces, how do you prove they aren't just random?
Right. How do you prove to a skeptic that this is an engineered science and not just a singer with, sloppy intonation?
Exactly. If you try to explain this continuous wave theory to a classically trained, Juilliard-educated music theorist who loves their 100-cent 12TC grid, they're going to say, look, the singer's trying to hit a G, but they're just flat. They are sliding around because they lack the technical skill to hit the exact note.
Which is incredibly dismissive.
Very. So how can modern science actually measure and prove that this infinite space is systematic, deliberate, and mathematically repeatable?
This is where the paper makes a brilliant pivot from historical theory to modern empirical acoustics. The authors outline a highly specific three-tiered software pipeline.
Oh, I loved this part.
They're proposing a methodology to bypass academic bias entirely and use hard data to prove the deliberate nature of these microtones.
Fighting a mathematical cage with better, more advanced math. So good.
Let's talk about the pipeline.
Okay, the first tool in their proposed pipeline is a pitch tracking software called Tony.
Tony. It sounds like a guy you hire to fix your plumbing, but for acoustics.
Right, Tony the pitch tracker. But Tony is a scientific software utilized for fundamental frequency tracking, or F0 tracking.
It's fundamental frequency.
Fundamental frequency is the lowest, loudest frequency of a complex sound waves. It's the pitch that our brain actually perceives. When you record a solo vocalist performing Qilaze or a solo traditional instrument, you run that audio file through Tony.
And what does it do? Tony maps the pitch as a continuous visual line across time. And what it shows on the screen is not a staircase. It doesn't show a flat line, a jump, and another flat line.
It shows the curves.
It visualizes continuous, complex, gliding pitch curves. It visually proves that the performer is consciously hovering in the in-between microtonal spaces.
It literally draws the exact path through the magnetic field.
Yes. But the second tier of the pipeline is where the real fight against Western bias happens. They use an acoustic editor software called Melodyne.
Oh, Melodyne. Now, Melodyne is an absolute industry standard in modern music production for pitch correction, right?
It is. It's auto-tune. It's the software that producers use to make pop singers sound perfectly in tune.
Right.
And we have to ask how Melodyne does that algorithmically. It has a default setting built into its code called snap to grid.
Oh boy.
When you sing a note that wavers, say it lands at 140 cents, Melodyne grabs that frequency and violently forces it to snap down to the 100-cent line or up to the 200-cent line.
It forces it onto the step.
It literally applies the Western 12TT mathematical cage to the audio file.
Oh, wow. So the modern software itself has a Western academic bias inherently built into its default programming. If it doesn't fit the staircase, the software just assumes it's an error and fixes it.
It absolutely does. So the authors state that researchers must intentionally disable the snap-to-grid function.
You have to turn off the bias.
Only by turning off that algorithmic bias can they use Melodyne's analytical tools to measure the exact cent deviation of any note in a traditional performance.
So they can see exactly where the singer is hovering.
They can gather empirical numeric data on exactly how far these scales intentionally bend away from the 12-tet standard.
And to do that, they are using some serious heavy-duty math. Yeah. The paper actually provides the formula. Let me read this because I kept staring at it, trying to make sense of it.
Go for it.
Okay, to calculate the precise cent deviation represented by the letter N of a recorded microtone relative to a standard Western reference frequency, you use the logarithmic interval formula, which is N equals 1,200 times the base 2 logarithm of F2 divided by F1.
It looks intimidating on the page, I know.
It really does. But let's break down why logarithms are even necessary here.
Well, human hearing is not linear, it's exponential. To go up one octave on a piano, the hertz frequency doesn't just increase by a set number, it doubles.
Right.
A4 is 440 hertz, A5 is 880 hertz, A6 is 1760 hertz. The base 2 logarithm in that formula is just a mathematical way to translate the exponential physical reality of a sound wave into a flat linear measurement of human perception, which are the cents.
But just think about the irony of this for a second. We're using high-level, complex, logarithmic acoustic physics formulas just to calculate and map the precise frequencies that Western music theory decided to completely ignore.
It's wild.
We need a literal supercomputer to find the notes that the grid intentionally structurally omitted centuries ago.
It is deeply ironic. And the final step in their pipeline is what makes the argument truly undeniable. They propose using PRET, which is a highly sophisticated phonetic spectrographic analysis software.
Spectrographic analysis. What exactly does PRET show us?
PRET extracts acoustic data down to the millisecond. It provides exact, high-resolution sound wave coordinates.
Okay, but why is that level of detail necessary?
Because if a Western theorist claims the singer is just sloppy, PRET can prove that the singer hits exactly 137 cents, holds it with total microstability for a specific millisecond duration, and then repeats that exact mathematical wave every single time they sing that specific lyric or emotion.
Oh, It proves intent.
Exactly.
You can't accidentally hit 137 cents 10 times in a row for the exact same duration. It proves the Qilaze is a rigid, repeatable science, not a mistake.
It proves that the continuous wave is a masterfully engineered technology, exactly as St. Yard intended all those centuries ago.
Okay, so modern software can track this fluid geometry in the human voice. And the voice is infinitely flexible because, well, our vocal cords aren't made of metal frets.
Right.
But what about instruments? Historically, a singer needs accompaniment. How did traditional cultures, without the aid of modern spectrographs, historically build physical instruments to match this incredibly fluid, microtonal vocal geometry?
Because if you build a piano, you immediately kill the continuous wave.
Exactly.
Well, this is where we see the physical manifestation of this acoustic philosophy. If your goal is to map a continuous spherical acoustic space, you cannot build a staircase.
You have to build a ramp.
Right. The paper highlights the physical construction of traditional African instruments to show how they solved this. Specifically, it looks at the masenko from East Africa and the goje, or goj, from West Africa.
I kept wondering how you physically build an instrument to play a continuous wave. The paper starts with a masenko. What does it look like?
The masenko is an East African bowed lute. It has a diamond-shaped sound box covered in parchment. But it has two defining characteristics that matter to our acoustic discussion. First, it only has one single string, usually made of horsehair. Second, and most importantly, the neck of the instrument is completely fretless.
Fretless, like a violin or a cello.
Yes. There are no metal bars across the neck. Let's think about what a fret actually does on a standard Western acoustic guitar.
Okay.
Those metal frets divide the string into fixed mathematical segments.
Frets are the staircase. They are physical speed bumps on the road of sound.
That's exactly what they are.
If I put my finger on the third fret of a guitar string, the metal fret forces the vibrating length of that string to a predetermined math equation, which gives me a G. If I slide to the fourth fret, I get a G sharp. I physically cannot play the notes in between. The speed bump kills the continuous wave.
That is exactly the mechanism. The frets are 12TA made physical. They isolate rigid notes. But traditional African instruments like the masenko were engineered specifically not to do that.
They were engineered to act as direct physical extensions of the human voice. Wait, so if a fret physically shortens the vibrating length of the string to a predetermined spot, a fretless string means the musician's finger is the fret. They have infinite micromillimeter control.
Because there are no speed bumps, the musician's fingers glide perfectly smoothly along the string. The musician has access to the entire infinite spectrum of pitch.
Wow.
They can produce a continuous wave of sound that perfectly mimics the exact fluid vocal ornaments, the Qilaze of the regional singers.
The paper mentions specific singing traditions, the Lalibela, the Hamina, and the Abawida wandering praise singers. The masenko isn't just playing a chord progression behind them, it is literally singing with them, matching their microtonal slides and formant shifts cent for cent.
It is an acoustic mirror of the human voice. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this structural philosophy is not isolated to East Africa. The paper points to the Sahel in West Africa, highlighting the goje.
The goje.
The goje is a one-stringed spike fiddle. And just like the masenko, it is completely fretless. It is esteemed in West African cultures, deeply tied to rituals and storytelling, specifically for its unique ability to mimic the pitch inflections and the actual speech patterns of the human voice.
Because their languages have all these fluid formant spaces, the instrument has to be able to talk. It has to be able to slide through the magnetic fields, just like the voice does.
Across the entire continent, the foundational philosophy of instrumentation is unified. Music does not live on isolated anchor notes. It lives in the continuous sliding waves between them.
Okay, so we have this incredible ancient system. We have sound mapped to the cosmos as a therapeutic technology. We have phonetic languages that demand microtonal fluidity. We have an acoustic science of Qilaze, and we have physical fretless instruments engineered to navigate this continuous wave.
It's a completely holistic acoustic system.
The acoustic system is perfect, but then history happens. The conversation in the paper shifts to the African diaspora, and it outlines a profound historical tragedy.
It is one of the darkest chapters of human history. Through the transatlantic slave trade and the subsequent centuries of displacement and migration, massive human populations were violently uprooted from these exact regions we are discussing.
And as they were displaced, they were systematically stripped of their material cultures.
They couldn't pack their belongings.
No. They couldn't bring the masenko. They couldn't bring the goje. They were stripped of the physical instruments that allowed them to express this continuous acoustic reality.
But the paper makes a crucial, powerful point here. You can physically deprive a person of an instrument. You can burn their possessions, but you cannot erase their internal acoustic memory.
The acoustic memory survived. The blueprint wasn't just in their minds, it was in their biology. It was in how they spoke, how they prayed, how they mourned.
The human voice remained the primary indestructible vessel, the Qilaze, the microtonal leans, the deep inherent understanding of how to navigate the magnetic tension between the anchors they carried, all of that within themselves across the ocean.
But eventually, this ancient internalized understanding of fluid acoustics had to interact with a new environment. These displaced musicians and their descendants encountered Western music.
They did.
They encountered Western classrooms, churches, and recording studios. And crucially, they encountered fixed-pitch instruments.
They were handed pianos, they were handed fretted acoustic guitars, they were handed the grid.
They were handed the staircase. So what happens when a mind and a soul that are wired from birth for a continuous, multidimensional sphere of sound are suddenly forced to express themselves on a flat 12T grid?
What happened was not a defeat. It wasn't a rejection of Western instrumentation, and it wasn't a loss of their heritage. It was a transmutation. When that unbreakable acoustic memory collided with the rigid grid, what emerged was the blues.
The blues. The foundational bedrock of jazz, rock and roll, R&B, basically all modern popular music. The paper is arguing that the blues is the continuous wave surviving inside the cage.
The blues is framed here as a highly sophisticated cross-cultural synthesis. These musicians intuitively adapted. They took ancient, continuous sound waves and forcibly mapped them onto a brand new acoustic canvas.
This is where the ethnomusicology gets incredibly specific, and it blew my mind. The paper draws direct structural kinships between those East African Kenyat scales we talked about earlier and the structure of the blues.
Stepping away from the useless pentatonic label, we can use the concepts of major and minor as bridges to see this. Let's look at Tizita major.
Right. Historically, Western theorists looked at Tizita major and approximated it as a major pentatonic scale. But the paper says its true emotional character comes entirely from the microtonal leaning, the Qilaze between the anchors.
And that structural behavior, the leaning, the sliding around the anchors, directly mirrors the architecture of the major blues scale.
It's the same movement.
In the blues, musicians are constantly bending notes to hover between a major and minor feel, to convey a complexity that standard Western major scales lack.
And then there's the minor side. The paper points to Tizita minor and body minor, describing them as having this profound, yearning, deeply melancholic quality.
A yearning that is derived entirely from the fluid shifts between the anchors. And that structure closely, almost identically, aligns with the standard minor blues scale. The acoustic memory found its new home.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's one thing to sing the blues. The human voice is naturally fretless, so it can perform the Qilaze. But what about the guitar?
Right. How do you play it on a grid?
Yeah. How do you play East African microtonal music on a wooden neck covered in metal speed bumps? The musicians essentially had to hack the technology.
They engineered physical modifications to bypass the mathematical cage. They took a fretted, equal-tempered instrument and forced it to behave like a fretless masenko.
How? Through string bending. If you've ever watched a legendary blues guitarist, think B.B. King or Stevie Ray Vaughan or Buddy Guy, they don't just press the string down and pluck it.
No, they manipulate it.
They hit the note, and then they physically push or pull the steel string up or down across the wood of the fretboard.
By altering the physical tension of the string mid-note, increasing the friction and the pull, they are accessing the infinite microtonal space. They start on the rigid grid, but by bending the string, they leave the staircase and enter the continuous wave.
They are manually raising the pitch by 30 cents, 45 cents, finding the exact microtonal coordinate they want.
They are literally bending the grid. And if bending the string wasn't enough, they invented the slide, the bottleneck slide.
This is perhaps the most brilliant adaptation of all.
Musicians in the Mississippi Delta who couldn't afford fretless instruments would break off the smooth glass neck of a bottle, sand down the edges, slip it over their finger, and press it against the strings of a cheap acoustic guitar.
But they wouldn't press the strings all the way down to touch the metal frets. They just hovered over them.
By sliding the glass along the strings without ever making contact with the frets, they completely bypassed the rigid grid.
They transformed a localized fixed-pitch Western guitar back into a fretless, continuous-pitch indigenous instrument.
It is an acoustic rebellion. It's a technological hack to reclaim their sensory heritage. But when they were bending these steel strings, when they were sliding this glass bottleneck, where were they aiming?
They weren't just sliding around randomly.
No. The paper zeroes in on a very specific mathematical destination.
Through all of these techniques, the vocal bends, the string bending, the slide guitar, these musicians were consistently targeting one highly specific acoustic space, the neutral third.
The neutral third. Let's break down the math and the profound emotion of this, because this feels like the absolute beating heart of the paper.
Let's do it.
Let's go back to our measurement of sense. In the rigid 12TS system, a minor third interval is exactly 300 cents. A major third interval is exactly 400 cents. As a musician on a piano, you have to choose one or the other, step 3 or step 4.
And structurally, minor usually sounds sad, melancholic, dark. Major usually sounds happy, triumphant, bright.
But the blues musicians, driven by their acoustic memory, didn't want 300, and they didn't want 400. They bent the strings to hover precisely in the middle of the magnetic field. They aimed for approximately 350 cents.
Halfway between minor and major, perfectly suspended.
That is the neutral third. It is a frequency that literally does not exist on a piano keyboard. You cannot play it. But it is the defining frequency of the blues.
And the emotional mechanics of this 350-cent space are just staggering. The paper delves into the neuroscience of it, stating that hovering at this exact microtonal point forces a state of cognitive suspension in the listener's brain.
Cognitive suspension. When your ear hears a minor third at 300 cents, your brain easily categorizes it. It files it away. This is sad.
Yeah.
When it hears 400 cents, it categorizes it. This is happy. But when you hit a human listener with 350 cents, the brain's binary categorization system breaks down.
The brain doesn't know which file folder to put it in.
It suspends the listener in a space where they have to process complex, multi-layered emotional states simultaneously, because the acoustic trigger is mathematically suspended between joy and sorrow.
The paper describes it as forcing the listener to hold profound grief and triumphant hope simultaneously. I mean, if that doesn't define the blues, I don't know what does.
It's beautifully put.
It is the sound of surviving unimaginable tragedy with your soul and your humanity intact. You cannot express that complex human reality on a rigid, equal-tempered grid. A piano key is too simple. You need the space in between to tell that story.
This raises an important question, and it is the question that the conclusion of the paper poses directly to the reader. What have we lost?
What have we lost by building the grid and enforcing it so strictly?
What have we lost as a global society by forcing this continuous, multidimensional technology of sound, this universal medicine originally meant by St. Gerd, to heal and align us into a flat 5-note box?
The artificial partitioning of sound. We created a systemic division in our own sensory world. By labeling everything outside of our 12-tet spreadsheet as a simplified pentatonic limitation or a sloppy intonation, we actually quieted the very frequencies that were mapped out to bridge human consciousness.
The paper concludes by making it very clear. The blue notes, the sliding vocal inflections, the Qilaze, they are not errors on a grid. They never were.
No.
They exist in the unmapped sacred spaces between the notes. They are the continuous wavefront of human emotion.
And the authors aren't just complaining about history. They're issuing a call to action, an open invitation to global scholarship.
It is a profoundly humble conclusion. They're calling upon ethnomusicologists, vocal coaches, physics researchers, and acoustic scientists across all borders to join them in mapping these in-between frequencies.
They're saying we have the tools now. We have Tony, we have Melodyne, we have Prod. The digital tools to measure and prove this sound wave exist. We don't have to rely on piano keys anymore. We just need the collective will to stop snapping everything to the grid.
And their future direction is beautifully stated. They intend to conduct direct empirical acoustic measurements, mapping the scent deviation profiles of these traditional singers.
That's going to be amazing research.
But more than that, they want to empower the voice. They want to ensure these microtonal insights are directly accessible to the global public, not just locked in academic journals.
Because it's not just about academic accuracy. The authors explicitly state that their role is to participate in the healing of modern humanity. By reclaiming this shared, borderless acoustic lineage, we aren't just liberating music from a cage, we are reminding ourselves of our connection to one another.
Through the restoration of our universal sound, as the paper says, we can finally be in tune with one another, literally and metaphorically.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means that the next time you hear a blues guitarist bend a string, stretching it across the wood, or you hear an ancient East African chant, or you hear a singer slide up into a note that makes the hair on your arms stand up, you are not hearing an accident.
You're hearing the ancient continuous wave.
You are hearing acoustic memory surviving a rigid world. You are hearing the sacred space between the stairs.
It shifts your entire paradigm of listening. You stop listening for the anchor points, the magnets, and you start listening to the tension and the journey between them.
It really makes you wonder if our deepest, most complex emotional states, like the profound grief and hope of the neutral third, if they live entirely in the fluid, continuous spaces between rigid categories. What else in our lives are we misinterpreting?
That's a deep thought.
Think about it. Your identity, your career path, your relationships. Have we falsely forced our own lives into a 12-tone, equal-tempered grid? Are you living your life jumping from step to step, snapping to a grid someone else designed, just to make yourself easier to categorize?
It's an easy trap to fall into.
Are we silencing our own microtonal variations just to fit the modulation of the modern world? What would happen to your life right now if you went into your own internal software and finally turned off the snap to grid feature? It might be time to find out. Take care, everyone. Keep exploring the space between the steps.